Welcome back to RBR, guys, and say hello to the fourth generation of Continental GT launching here in the speed specification. It's the first Bentley since back in the 1950s to return to that signature singular round light structure, and kind of inspired by amazing limited edition cars that we've had in the recent past. But more important than that, it's the most powerful Bentley ever, with almost 800 PS on tap. Unsurprisingly, from a performance hybrid setup, as is becoming the trend, something that we're going to discuss in detail today. Today, we're going to check out every detail of this new car. I'll show you a bit about the coupe. We're going to focus on this GTC speed. Of course, there's design to talk about, there's the performance that we mentioned, and there's also some updates to the interior infotainment system as well. And then we will do a Raz Super VFX dive into what has changed under the skin, which is going to be really important for Bentley's future. So guys, way back before Vickers went and sold Bentley and VW acquired it, etc., Bentley made their first ever two-door cars in the 1950s. And these were some of the most expensive cars in the world. And they were also some of the fastest cars in the world, reaching speeds like 120 miles per hour back then. And they were made to traverse the continent of Europe, hence the name Continental. And now all these years later, we finally return to that type of design with the singular lights on the front. And I think it's a really good look for Bentley going forward. I think this will probably translate over the other cars. You compare it to our previous GT Continental Speed that we drove, and it's instantly recognizable as an all-new design. I think undoubtedly inspired by things like the Batur, maybe less Batur and more Bacalar, particularly with those all-new lights that I'll give you a close look at in a minute. But either way, a really good look. So let's first have a look around this, explore some of the new design, which is really, really nice, and then we'll talk about what's changed under the skin. So guys, like I said, I think this is going to be the face of Bentley going forward. And it's a nice face. It's based on those limited edition cars, which, will that upset those owners? I don't think so. But it will really make Bentley customers very happy, because I think this is a really nice look, and it's nice to have a change after all these years of having twin headlights. Now the lights are really the main thing that's going to attract you toward this. Come and have a look at these closer up. So you can see instead of the twin headlights, we've got just a single one with this very strong eyebrow, and then you've got this graphic at the bottom here, and it's almost like jewel-like. It's really nicely done. It's very similar to those special editions, so that looks great. And then when you look at it from dead on the front, and that's your new face with the two lights, I think it looks great. Of course, the whole front bumper is now different as well. The intakes, you've got a much larger, lower splitter here, which looks great. The grille is different as well. Not massively different, but I think, so that is a good looking front end to me. You can see it's got enough change in character to leave you in no doubt that this is the new generation. I really, really do like the lights. I think they're really jewel-like. They're distinctive. You know, not a lot of manufacturers have this type of thing. Everybody going for the typical slim lights, or VW Group doing the silly two, you know, one light in the bumper, one light up here. This is unique, and it should be, because Bentley is always trying to be more unique in the luxury space. So a really handsome front end, one taking good design cues, I think more from the modern special editions than the historic cars, as Bentley would say. But either way, that's going to make you turn back and look when you see that on the road. The side, not too different. You used to have this L-shaped graphic that went up on the speed. That's now simpler. It's just a straight line with this trim that finishes off on our rear arch. Rear arch still that same strong resting beast, as Bentley like to call it. The wheels, these are the wheels that we used to have previously. I've shown you the new ones that you get as well, which are really quite nice, quite claw-like. But yeah, the side is pretty much instantly recognizable Bentley GTC, right? Now let me show you something weird that you've never seen on a GT Continental before. More and more common sight these days, isn't it? These charging ports. The good thing is you can charge the battery that's within here within around about 2.5 hours at maximum capacity, which is good, and then you'll get around about 50 miles, as we said. But that is weird to see on a car that has this iconic shape, right? You just don't expect to see a charging port in there. But such are the times that we live in. And actually, I think it's a positive. For daily use, it's a really, really useful feature. Then we have the rear, and check out these amazing new lights. Inspired by lava, they say, and I'm not one to disagree. Those look really good. Again, I think quite inspired by our recent special editions. Really nice and slim. and kind of, I think they accentuate kind of the width of the rear, which is nice. We've got a new lower diffuser here. I'll show you what this V8 sounds like in a minute, so do wait for that because we love V8s at RBR, don't we? But yeah, that's a good looking rear end. You still have that really strong shoulder, as we said, and the lights, I think the slimmer lights only help that. The cool thing about the GTC, of course, is that you get to see that lovely interior at the same time as well. So that is all around a really good looking car. Now, one downside of this hybrid powertrain, a lot less boot space. I haven't got the exact figures because they don't have them to hand yet, same on the weight of the car, but that's a lot less. It's going to be the same for the coupe as well. So that alongside the charging port, some things you won't be used to as a GT customer. So a nice upgrade in design, no doubt about that. A lot of inspiration, obviously, from the Bacalar lights, the Batur as well, but I still think Batur and Bacalar stand apart because there was things like on the Batur with the endless bonnet and the unique shaped grille, of course the fact that it had the V12 engine, etc., that still set that limited edition apart. But it's nice that the new cars are taking inspiration from that. It's horrible when you see these great limited editions and they're reserved for only those people who can afford them. It's nice that the standard production car has a really, really nice, modern but retro design. So the design is great, and I'll get onto the interior in a moment. Let's talk about the more important topic, which is the performance, because so much has changed under the skin here. Sadly, for a lot of customers, the W12 is gone. Okay, that may upset a lot of people. But what we have in replacement is not something that's that bad. It's actually better in probably every single measurable fact, apart from maybe emotion if you're linked to that. But I can tell you in terms of performance, this is not lagging behind at all. Like I said, the most powerful Bentley ever. How does it do it? It's the usual way. So we've got their V8 bi-turbo in here, but it's not been left unchanged. It has changed because we do have an e-motor that sits within our gearbox here on the front. We'll talk about the gearbox in a minute. And finally, a 25.9 kilowatt battery sitting behind our rear axle. The first benefit is we get a really nice 50-50 weight distribution because of that. The V8 itself produces 600 PS by itself, but it has changed. It doesn't have an auto start-stop anymore because we have the e-motor in there. It doesn't have the old vacuum system that you normally find in a combustion engine. And its fuel injection pressure has gone up from 200 to 350. It also doesn't require the twin-scroll turbochargers thanks to the e-motor helping with 190 PS by itself and 450 Newton meters. So it's reverted to single scrolls. So that's powerful by itself. Then you have the e-motor, as I said, within the gearbox, 190 PS, and then our battery on the rear. What does this give us altogether? 782 PS, 1,000 Newton meters of torque total, and a really quick 0 to 60 for a car of this size. And we maintain a really high top speed. And better than all of that is, you also get the benefit of a decent amount of electric range, 80 kilometers or around about 50 miles, which then is going to make this an even better car for luxurious and daily duties as well. And, of course, so much more powerful than what's come before it. You look at the specs versus the previous GT Speed. Way, way more powerful, right? And quicker. You look at the specs versus even the Batur with the most powerful W12 that they ever had, and this car is more powerful. Now, of course, the weight is going to be higher. We will talk about weight in a minute, but just on pure performance figures, this is very impressive. Now, of course, all of that power goes to an all-wheel drive system with a clever brain to manage the power, and we'll get onto that in a second. We've got the 8-speed dual clutch gearbox, and finally, the electronic diff that we saw introduced in the last Speed that made it such a dynamic feeling car. Rear wheel steer is back complementing this whole system. So you've got the rear wheel steer, you've got the e-diff, you've got our anti-active roll stabilization as well, as we saw in the past, which is so helpful. And then the final missing bit of this dynamics portion is suspension. Out goes our 3-chamber air suspension of old, and in comes a much more advanced 2-valve and 2-chamber air suspension setup. 2 valves, so we're controlling the compression and the rebound per wheel. And essentially, this is going to make the car way more comfortable and way more sporty, depending on what you need. We haven't had a chance to drive this yet. Some magazines have done a first drive of a prototype, and apparently this is behaving very, very dynamically despite the weight increase of the car. What is the weight increase? Our previous car weighed around about 2.3 tons, just under. This has got to add a couple hundred kg, right? From what I've seen, maybe 2,500, right? Now, the new suspension will help in terms of the handling, and like I said, magazines have driven it, but we'll only know how that's affected the drive when we get a hold of it. What we can say is when you look at this car versus even its staunchest rivals who pride themselves on their power, this sits now above them in terms of at least the power bracket. So it seems like Bentley getting a bit more interested in making their cars not just luxury cruisers, but definitely in the game of performance as well. Now, there are 4 new driving modes in this, thanks to the hybrid setup. One that W.O. Bentley would be very proud of, which is EV mode. He always wanted a completely silent 100-mile-per-hour machine, so you have that with the EV mode. It's got, of course, that 190 PS and the 450 Newton meters that it can use, which should be enough for pottering about in and around town. Then we've got 3 other modes. One is EV Boost, which of course uses the entire system power of the V8 and our electric. Then we have regen braking, which of course you'll be used to, and another one, which is Charge, which will literally use the motion of the wheels to charge up the battery, because though they made a plug-in hybrid, they didn't want to inconvenience customers by having to plug it in all the time. So hopefully this Charge mode will allow you to circumvent that element. So a really impressive car all round. I'm excited to drive it, particularly the coupe, which sadly I didn't get to see today. Now let's head inside and see what changes have been made to the interior. Right guys, now let's head inside so I can show you some beautiful interior, isn't it? I mean, come on, it's a Bentley. It's always got a beautiful interior, stitched in the best way. I absolutely love that projector. That's a really good job. So no surprises in here. It is class-leading interior, class-leading trim. It is genuinely beautifully done here with the blue and the black nappa. And this is kind of where Bentley is really genuinely unmatched in the way that they trim their cars. Now, one great thing is they have updated their system here. Now, we know it's a Porsche shared system, but this is so much more reactive than it ever was in the past. You've got nice large touch points, which is great. You've got wireless Apple CarPlay, all of those things that perhaps might have annoyed previous owners. Now you've got a much quicker system to interact with, which is only going to make living with this even better, because obviously this is all about luxury. It needs to do that luxury part really well, and luckily this does exactly that. See, we've got tons of ambient lighting that is doable in here as always. So all of this, I love how reactive it is. This is what was missing before, and now I feel like living with this is going to be a joy. What's great is in the driver zone you've got different views and an all new design for the digital cluster as well, which is really nicely done. I like the fact that they've done a skeuomorphic design where it looks like it's analog but it is digital, because a lot of people go very plain, and I don't think that would have suited the character of the Bentley. All the rest of this design is, you know, it's so characterful, it would have been a shame if the digital screen wasn't. So that all makes sense to me. What's great is we haven't replaced buttons with screens, so you've got tons of buttons here for your climate control. Your start stop is still beautiful as well, and then you can go through mode select on here, which again is great. So, but here's something you haven't seen before, E mode. That's interesting, isn't it? Something you never would have seen in a Bentley before. And it's nice, look, you've still got the touchy-feely element of the vents, you've got your analog clock here. None of that has been reduced in the digital age just because this is a hybrid performance car. All of that stuff that we love about Bentley being maintained in the interior, and I'm so glad that that is the case and they've not lost sight of that in this new world, even if we've got a hybrid setup for the engine. And the final, the coup de grace of staying true to themselves in the interior is the digital detox and going back to our analog dials here, which is so important. I'm so glad that that still exists. I don't want to see that half the time, and I know neither do you. Now, I'm sure you want to hear what the V8 sounds like. Before we sign off, let me show you that now. Now, all we need to do is shift it into sport. Oh, that sounds good. So guys, still sounding really good. That's your new Bentley Continental GT launching in speed. There will be normal ones or other variants probably later on as well. I for one think, in terms of design, a really good upgrade. How is this drivetrain going to be with Bentley customers? I think we have to drive it first. It's got to hit the notes of luxury, it's got to hit the notes of performance. I think it hits the notes of design already, and I think the daily bit will be great with the battery, but the whole package, we have to drive it to wait and see. So hopefully the coupe next time on RBR. If you've enjoyed this episode of RBR, please, as always, do like and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.